Hello, awakened souls. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Ascend the Matrix podcast. I'm your host, Chris King. I'm a shamanic healer, ascended astrologer, retreat facilitator, grid worker, medicine alchemist, and ascension and awakening guide. And I have my co host here with me, Brittany Renee. I'm going to let you
Hello.
take over.
Hi, I'm so glad to be back. I missed you guys last week. So happy to be back here. I'm Brittany Renee. I'm a psychic intuitive embodiment coach, energy worker and healer, grid worker, code worker, all of the things. Super excited to be here today. We've got an excellent guest. So, Chris, if you want to introduce Sean.
Absolutely. Yes. Sh- Sean, how do you say your last name, by the way?
It's Kehoe.
Kehoe. I knew I wasn't going to
Yep.
pronounce it right. So thank you so much for being here, Sean Kehoe. He began his awakening experience at age 15 and had a Kundalini and shamanic awakening at age 19. He was a sensitive child, starseed, and survivor of CPTSD, as many of us and many of you listening. He's a musician and consults for regenerative agriculture, ecological landscaping, wellness, and exopolitics. I love that. And I want you to share about that here in a bit. His contact experiences started in 2011 through the appearance of a light ship in Brazil that answered yes or no questions telepathically that guided him to spending time with Dr. Stephen Greer, who is someone many of you know, and Paola Harris, who's another force in the ufology world, and in 2012, which led to him being in Dr. Greer's Enlightened ET Contact documentaries. He and his family live in Sedona, Arizona, and he does session work for a wide variety of topics, healing people and parents to integrate their life missions on Earth in this exciting and transformative time. We're so excited to have you here to talk about what you do. So, Sean, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks so much, you two, for having me on. Yeah, I we have very similar past as far as just the general healing work. And a lot of what I do with people is trying to connect the full spectrum of our being. So that's why I'm my consulting. I'm a farmer and absolutely into health as well. And then for people who are having these extraterrestrial experiences, having these spiritual experiences, I've had experiences in a lot of different traditions all around the world and a lot of different paths. So I help people to integrate. So a lot of times people will come to me and they're kind of way up in the air, just like you were talking about, Lisa Renee and, some of the, alien stuff and whatnot. So just a little blurb that I always kind of give people is, so someone will call me and I always do a discovery call with people just to see if I can, have anything to offer them. So, someone, will come to me and hey, do you do alien implant removal? I was like, well, let's talk a little bit, let's see what you're, and, this particular person, it really just came down to, he was just having a hard time talking to his wife and he was just kind of a doormat in the relationship. And it's this magical thinking that we get into where we'd rather be this Jedi warrior, slashing off the alien implants rather than just speak to our spouse or our, significant others. So, it varies very much. So if the channels just open up and the Andromedans and everyone just wants to really just give it to that person, it's time for that person, that's great. But I try to build a foundation, especially when I'm working with younger people, especially. So yeah, so in general, so right now you'll see on my website, there's just a little spot for consulting and for mentoring. So mostly when people come to me for session work, it's just through word of mouth or people find me on the internet. But I'm in the process right now because I'm a landscaper and I sort of have kind of a 9 to 5, implementing these things. I'm moving more into the consulting on all levels. I've got a
Yeah.
consulting friend who does this in boardrooms, just okay, your business isn't working, but what's the internal dynamics going on here? And say you have 12 people at in a boardroom, what's each individual's piece in here? Maybe it's more of a psychological, and so we're developing a network right now too, because I might as well just bridge into the ES piece. So often what
Go
happens in
for it.
some of
I'm
these
like, let's do it.
so often what happens in these communities is that you have this person who comes into the community and they're highly traumatized, and rather than just saying, hey, that's outside of my wheelhouse, I don't have training in that, let me get you to a good therapist. And that's why we're developing this network. So if someone needs more, nutritional counseling or whatever, let's just get your body stable, let's get your nervous system stable. And then if you want to come back around and hear some of the galactic stuff, or start to bring that kind of, those kind of things through, or the, shamanic, traditions, then we'll go there. But where are you at right now? And then just being honest, do I feel like I have something to offer you? Because too, people are trying to make money and whatnot. So, someone's calling me for a session, so just mean I should do the session. And, they may not, then just like you're saying, they may not help, just not be helpful, send someone in a direction, that doesn't serve them. So that's why I had and I'm getting older now, I'm 50 now. So, and I've just seen a lot of things, And so depending on where you are, how old you are, how, early, where you're at in your awakening experience right now, and just being humble that we're always still learning. It's just, I may have pieces for you, but every time I do a session with someone, I'm always learning from them. So yeah, so that's as far as bringing in the ES piece, that's what I saw in there. So, rather than, hey, why don't you just step outside the community, just work on yourself for a while, and then, but I have to say though, I feel personally that the community now, no, I guess I can't put it that way. So just like you said, so, if you go in there and you're discerning, you could get the pieces that you need. But then there's also a lot of damage happening in there, because I don't feel like they have the experience just to say, maybe this isn't for you. And on a really human level, and this is just the piece that I wanted to share publicly. So this is a really good example. So in that community, they put a really high emphasis.
Real quick, because I want to give our listeners a little bit of context for what we're talking about here. Okay. So you keep bringing up ES, which is energetic synthesis. And I just want you to tell us a little bit about that. But before we go into that, I want to just say thank you to you. Brittany and I both are probably feeling this at the same time, because for those listening and watching, we're about to go through the whole spectrum of spirituality, because spirit exists in the galactic center, where the Arcturians and Andromedans and angels are. It also exists in the wood, in the plants that you're landscaping with, and the really sacred masculine grounding that you're bringing into the spiritual sphere. And I'm sort of like, do you have a gay little brother that you can put me in contact with? I'm really kidding. Like Brittany's got someone who is very beautiful and aligned, but we don't often hear in the spiritual space grounded masculine forces who are really, it's not like you're coming into it going, oh, quit talking about negative aliens and all of that, as if it's not real, because there are energies like that happening. But you are bringing that pillar and that foundation in that needs to be there. Like when you talked about the guy who was in a relationship and he felt like a doormat, there was something very simple happening. Was there an archontic force in his mind, preying on his insecurities within the relationship? Sure, but that happens to everyone within the false matrix. We first have to start with how it's getting in the door, which seems like where your work is really taking you. And so, Brittany, I know you can talk a lot about the masculine energy in life and like how important this is, if you'd like to share.
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm going to actually speak on this point coming from the perspective of when I started really waking up. So, Sean, we haven't got to know each other too well yet. I'm Native American. I'm Assiniboine Indian. My grandfather's whole line is the chief of our tribe. And so I grew up in a very rooted, spiritual, sage home. I really denied a lot of my gifts and all the things for a really long time. And when I finally leaned in, I kind of went 0 to 60, because I'm just that person who goes big or goes home. And I put this kind of belief system around spirituality, or what I thought it was, right? The people that I had started connecting with, mentors that I hired. And in relationships, I remember thinking, you know, I have to have this partner who's super awakened, who's doing the same thing. We have to both be healers. Like, you know, this was just what I felt like I was supposed to have. And I did date a couple of people who were in spirituality and all of that. And then I got rocked, took a really big break. And the person that I'm dating now is very open and understands that there are other life forms. He understands like psychic intuitive abilities are real, all of the things. So he's very open. He holds the space in the process. However, he's not like going into the sphere of energy work like I am. But what is beautiful is that he has this grounding force. And I've talked about this so many times, and I'm like, I'm always so in the air. I'm in the ether. I'm always doing all of these things that are, you know, 50 million places other than here half of the time. And my journey now has been very much bringing me more into this presence of kind of tethering back into the earth a little bit more and really leaning into this grounded energy here. And I'm now actually working in like birth space as well. So that's a whole other
Wow.
episode for us at some point. But I think that it's really important for those of you who are watching, who are maybe just in the beginning of your spiritual process or wherever you might be. You know, I think that these labels and these boxes that we've been operating in, and many of us operate in, especially in the beginning, are a little bit dangerous because we start to believe and put these like lines around what's real, what's not. And I think that so much, in my opinion, of the reason that we come into this human experience is to experience a lot of things. And sometimes it doesn't look like the person next to you who also is awakening, or, you know, anyone who you might be following on social media. And, you know, people get really, I think they cling to like, well, what's real? What's true? Like, what's happening? Well, this person said this. And discernment, which is something, you know, Chrys and I were talking about before we hit record, is really, really necessary right now. I think we have a wave of awakening coming on the planet that I think is going to be bigger than we had in 2020 when everything started shifting. So, you know, I think I'm excited to hear more about ES and what you were leaning into, because I think that it's important for us to really constantly be open to this discernment within ourselves, but also understanding that as we evolve, things are going to shift. Our reality, our truths, all these things are going to expand. And I think that's really important for anyone coming into the sphere of consciousness.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Absolutely.
Sean, before we go into energetic synthesis and Lisa Renee, and which is just a doorway into a realm of spiritual New Ageism, that can be quite a rabbit hole and a labyrinth that is hard to get out of, once you're in it. I want you to tell us, because you know you were close with Lisa Renee, you've been involved with many different types of shamanic teachings, and you've gone around the world. I want you to tell us a little bit about how you came to this point before we get to that, and how you, where your awakening occurred for you, how it took you into the work that you're doing, and then how that led you into meeting Lisa and working in that realm. Because I am getting very intuitively that you were supposed to be in her sphere to help dismantle some of what is actually happening. So tell us your whole journey
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah, I resonate with that too, and I just want to make sure that I'm clear as well, as far as I wouldn't have considered myself close to Lisa Renee, but I'll touch more
Yeah,
on that,
I
just as
want to
far
say
as
just much closer
just
than me, who reads who has read Ascension Glossary. You know, I've never met her. So for someone who a lot of you know who we're talking about, you actually were around her in person. That's what I want people to understand, is this isn't just, I saw this woman online.
yeah, but it's also good the way that you touched on it, because I'll elaborate on what winds up another sort of traditional wound that happens in these communities is that. So, and this is written about, this is kind of like, textbook, spiritual community stuff, and but written about for a long time, like even back to the, the 60s, commune days, is that what happens is the leader has the awakening experience. And so that all these people are drawn to this person, for what's coming through that person. And so And then the sort of self starts to come back in, the wounding, and everything. You're not on that spiritual high all the time. You don't, you're not, seeing UFOs all the time or having spirits visiting you, in your bedroom at night and whatnot. But then if that leader, then what happens is that leader is afraid to face their own trauma, then they seclude themselves, and then they form this natural ring of protective sycophants around them. So they all had the same kind of trauma bond.
Would you say this is why it's so hard to get to her? Because, like 7 years ago when I first found Ascension Glossary, and I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Like now, a lot of the things I'm reading on there, I've actually downloaded in journeys and meditations and, seen a lot
Mhm.
of these things. I've seen emerald hearts in my meditations and then when I read it on Ascension Glossary, it resonated. It may not have been the same thing, but I had my own experiences at some point to give me context. But at first, it was just like, whoa. Okay, it actually instilled a lot of fear in me back in the day. So just tell
Yeah,
us,
and that's another.
yeah, go ahead.
So, and then I'll just touch on a little bit how this relates to Ashayana Dean as well.
Yes, please do.
So yes, you're right. There was a time, I've talked to older members who were in the community from the beginning, and Lisa was more accessible and, doing session work for people. They would do grid working projects, where people would get to spend, time with her in person. But I think, and it's really, deep talking to you guys, because what was interesting before anything sort of went awry when I was in ES, Lisa had a similar experience with Ashayana Dean, because Lisa had her awakening and she had all, almost like she was reading Voyagers. I don't know if you guys know Voyagers, Ashayana's material.
Yes.
And it was just this universal thing that was happening. And Lisa didn't even know a thing about Ashayana at all. And so then Ashayana found out about Lisa, and she's like, "Oh, she's just lifting all of my material," and literally took Lisa to
Yeah, that
court.
is one of the let's say gossip narratives that are out there is that Lisa Renee didn't connect to the guardian races. She actually just took Ashayana Dean's texts and made it her own to create this, super powerful SEO machine, which is Ascension Glossary. Because if you type in Ascension anything on Google, that is in one of the top 10 searches every single time is Ascension
Mhm.
Glossary. So
Gotcha.
and so I'm glad that you brought that up because I don't want I want someone who has actually been in contact with her directly to speak more from this because it's very much a narrative that is around in the community or out there in the world that she's simply just ripped off Ashayana Dean and Ashayana Dean is a clone and she's been mind controlled and now she's been taken over by and these things are happening in the world but also this is the narrative that's being spun. So
Mhm.
tell us a little bit more about this not being accessible because I'm sure as if I was Lisa Renee and this was really genuine to me, even though I may have trauma and ego stuff that I'm not working out, if you have all of these people, acting, going insane around the information you're bringing through and then making up all these lies and comparing you to Ashayana Dean, I might want to create a little castle around me too, you know,
Okay.
no matter
Mhm.
how it
Mhm.
would look to the people out there. So I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible.
Mhm. No, you're doing a great job. So, and that's an interesting piece because what was also interesting is before things went awry with Lisa, she was also talking about being more in the community, having more face-to-face interactions. So on the one hand, and this is a trauma healing piece too, as far, uh, if you're wounded in community, the way to heal is through community.
Yeah.
But if so there's a certain level of that is understandable, especially when you're as at least as public as her material is, that, I'm sure she's just undated, all the time. So, and it was, so basically so my awakening, basically, I consider myself a Toltec.
Mm.
and as far as my soul blueprint. And so someone could say the same thing about, oh, you just read the Castaneda books, and now you're you're the Toltec guy. And there's so many too. There's all these other people too who have interacted with Castaneda that people don't know about. All these random other people too, and oh, this is my experience with Castaneda, And so there's actually a decent amount of those people out there, including, it's actually a really good book, A Man Who Met Castaneda after he crossed over.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
the reason that I embody that, and I don't mind saying that as far as my own personal experience, is like, yes, that material was a huge part of my awakening process. And I did get to spend a little time with one of Don Juan's other female apprentices, Marilyn Tunishend. But my Kundalini awakening wasn't chakras. My Kundalini awakening was more in the Toltec, like the way that I experienced the energy centers, and more from that philosophy and that experience. So what happened to me is these two particular energy centers on either side of my hips, which is also a certain, it does dovetail with Kathara stuff as well.
Yeah.
But I was in a yoga pose, and then those two spheres aligned, and then my sacrum just popped.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as that happened, I stood up, and I had an awareness of my physical body and my energy body. So anytime that I did something that was impossible for the physical body to do, like say like you turn your arm, then my energy body, what is capable of the impossible, would come out,
Yeah.
so,
Wow.
and then, so the way, it just wasn't, it wasn't, it wasn't chakras, it just wasn't, even though I practice yoga and, I work with those things, it was very Toltec, and it just, allowed me to feel my higher self.
And where
And
can
then
people
in
learn
that,
more about this, Sean? So this is newer to me because I'm familiar with Carlos Castaneda and the Toltec and Don Juan. But for people who are not familiar with this, tell us, because I had a Kundalini awakening and it was terrifying, um, and it was horrific for me at first. I'm so grateful for it, but it was very chakra related. It was going into,
mm,
where the chakras are said to be, I was feeling them in the different
mhm,
chapters of it over the course of a year and a half when it was occurring constantly. So for me, it really rose up and went into the different chakra points the way the Vedas would talk about it. So tell us a little bit about
mm.
Toltec and your Kundalini awakening a little bit more, because this will give people more of a firm foundation for maybe why you are so drawn, not to go out into outer space and into the 12D Ascension, Ruby, Emerald, Templars so much, and you're more grounded in your approach, which they were. That's much more grounded earth shamanic work. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I do with people that I do sessions for, is because every teacher, I can't remember, it's like Roosevelt or something, they have this saying, like the person in the arena, you know, like if you're, you know, pointing the finger, if you're in the audience, and you're pointing the finger, like those two people who are in the arena, they're in the arena, like they're doing it, they're duking it out, or however you want to take that. So in the Toltec tradition, we have a saying where you need to meet your teachers, because you don't know if the spirit is just moving through these people and the ontology is just giving you a message that you need to hear. My friend had an experience one time where he was on a bunch of mushrooms in Michigan, and there was this drunk homeless person, and he walked by him and he just channeled some big
Right,
piece in my friend's life that he just needed to hear.
right.
So then we find out how embodied people are when we interface with them.
Yes.
So I think that's, and especially now that we have the internet, you can look, you got 7 billion people that can have a message coming through. But then when you meet them, they may not even remember what they said. Their personal life may be a shambles or whatever the case. So it's like, how embodied are they in what they're saying? And so, a big part of, the past 5 years of my life is past 5 years of my life is I'm studying a lot of the Greek and Persian traditions right now, because so much of that was the philosophy, the love of wisdom was embodying this knowledge. And I think we're in a very similar, I'm experiencing this very similar sort of full circle that's happening in society right now, because that particular time period, lots of drugs, lots of healing, political upheaval, and there's the whole spectrum, crazy dark stuff that was going on, but it was just kind of a free for all. They were free to explore all these things.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that I help people with, even just learning, basic logic, just like, who, what, when, where, why, do you, okay, so-and-so is like saying this. Okay, so that's the who. How much do you really know about that person? Are you just regurgitating their story? So, and then in my awakening at that moment in time, also what came with that experience was my earliest traumatic childhood memory. And in the, and then my stepfather was drunk in the living room, the one who had hurt me. And I went out and I had a conversation about what happened, so I was 19 at the time, and I had a conversation with him about what happened, when I was 7. And it was similar in that way, because he was just kind of in this altered state. So he just came through it, and I got all this, context at the time. And there's always layers, that come up, and, thankfully he doesn't mind, talking about it. He's apologized, made amends. And so, I don't know what it was like for you guys, but that's also another very traditional aspect of the Kundalini awakening, because if we are allowed to be who we are from day one, that energy just rises up naturally and activates everything that it needs to. And by the time you're, 17 or whatever, you're just ready to rock and do your thing. But, these sort of, I consider myself kind of a second generation starseed, and I love, I've got one of my father's like earlier wives, it was like a first generation, and hearing her experience. And so it's very common in that way that we experience that squashing down only to have it resurface at a later time. And I just went through a big healing experience a few months ago, which I'm only a couple months out of, where I was just in a free state for 3 months because I had more trauma memories surfacing, which led me to, talk to different family members and, get more pieces. And that's actually, why I'm really, thankful to this woman, because she's given me all this context. Because when something isn't going well in your life, or things aren't clicking or whatever, you're just like, what the hell is going on? I'm doing everything that I possibly can. Why are things just not clicking? What am I missing? And so one of the things that she helped me go back to is one of the first memories that I had of where, my father wanted to shut down my Kool-Aid stand. It's like, oh, I was trying to make money,
Right.
so, obviously that's
Mhm.
related to whatever, trying to make money in the world. So that's kind of the space that I can hold in these sessions for people, and let it, allow it to surface. But then, just like I said, if it's outside of my wheelhouse, that's why we're trying to work on this network, so that no matter what it is, we can refer, to people with the experience.
Yeah, I think there's a
So,
huge piece I want to talk to real quick, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
no.
when I met Brittany, she was helping me with my doing embodiment work. So, Brittany, I sort of want you to talk to the piece about embodiment, because this is a huge part. Because you all, what we're about to talk about when we get into Lisa Renee energetic synthesis, Ashayana Dean, 12D Ascension Reishi Dragon codes of Ascension Light, when you get into this really high vibrating information and all these words, if you're not embodied in your body, embodied in your masculine and your feminine, because what your work feels very embodied. You're very embodied in a lot of the work you do. But as Brittany, someone who embodies the Pluto archetype, you know that embodiment can usually come in the form of these death and rebirth cycles as well, which Sean just went through one of those, where that there was a death to a part of the ego, but it also sounds like a death to one of the blockages or the funhouse mirrors that we set up for ourselves to protect ourselves, that comes down and you see what actually happened, which is a part of our embodiment. And our ego starts to say things like, I'm doing all this work. What's wrong? What am I doing? When actually you're getting an A plus, the fact that you remembered that and that it's coming up into your system to be
Mm,
cleared and witnessed
mm.
and seen. So Brittany, I want you to talk a little bit about embodiment because this is someone who really inspired a lot of my embodiment work as well.
Thank you, babes. I wanted to really also say before I go into that, Sean, I just want to thank you because the energy that you're bringing into this episode is something that Chrys and I talk about a lot, just being so authentic and so vulnerable and so open about being a leader, being someone who does healing, someone who does this deep work with people. We also still have our own work and experiences that we move through. And oftentimes I think leaders are put on these pedestals, especially when we start to channel and download and share and heal at levels that amaze people, that doesn't negate our process. And so I just want to say thank you for being so open about that,
Mm,
because that's huge for this community as consciousness is on the planet right now. As far as embodiment, yes. So in my awakening process, I actually had mentors at the very beginning of me really starting to wake up. And I found them online. So it was one of these like, found them on YouTube through random searches of spirituality things, contacted them, ended up starting to work with them. And it was almost this like golden key. It felt like it was like, oh, like they're answering all of these things I need. I feel like I'm really getting connected. And, I have so much love and respect and really gratitude for that part of my experience, because what it did, though, is it really helped me understand the humanness of the leaders too. And, it really helped me start to understand what embodiment is and means. I ended up working for them. So I was a client, moved into being a practitioner,
Mm.
and then I started working for them and I started getting very personally close to them. And so when you just were mentioning it's important to meet, your teachers or your mentors, I was sitting here and I was like, so true. Yes. Like I want to double down on that. Um, and what was really interesting is that at first it seemed when I started to meet them like, oh, they're just, they're still human, they're going through their things. But I realized over time how inauthentic they actually were and how against even just a baseline moral code for me being connected to them was. And for my journey, this was like, these were my mentors. This was who I worked with. This was my bread and butter pay. I was working completely as a stay-at-home mom, for this company. And spirit just got really loud with me because I literally said at the beginning of, it was 2022, I was like, I want the word for the year to be embodiment. Like, I want to learn embodiment as deeply as I can. And we know when we, you know, ask to go on a journey to learn something, we're going to see all the places that it's not working. And I did. And by the end of that year, I basically chose to step away from this completely because there were so many things that I kept trying to bring compassion into and kept trying to be like, well, we're all human, we're all whatever. And it just got to a point that I'm like, you're not being honest. You're not in your authenticity. You're not living what you're preaching to people. You're selling things that are so out of alignment for even your frequency that you're bringing into these containers. Like, I don't want to be here when the shoe drops and be connected to what's happening. So I have to like make a break, which was really tough in lots of ways. But what that really assisted me in seeing all of it is that there is a key, I think, in our connection that people either have or they don't have. And I think when you meet people, it's very clear because now on social media, we can swipe and see 30 seconds of anybody channeling something or sharing something or, whatever, which they very well could have gotten from their own swiping session 10 minutes earlier that now they're copying and pasting, or they could be actually connected. So I think that making this meeting of your mentors at one point is a beautiful point. I also think, though, that the level of embodiment is really felt when you even see them or spend time with them, even virtually, I would say, for over 30 minutes. When you sit with someone for an hour on a call, right? Like if you're leading a community, most of the time you can start to feel a little bit more. But I think that that face-to-face interaction with someone's frequency really speaks volumes. And the embodiment part is that if you are going to lean into who you are and what you're here to do, you have to be ready to die on that hill of what you're here to do over and over and over, and sit with the parts of you that you're like, I don't want to sit with that part. I don't want to go there. I don't want to open up that closet. And the people who are the most embodied are the ones who are doing the work that you're talking about. It's like, I too have been in freeze state before, where I'm just like sitting there with a part of my inner child and I'm like, I don't even know how to get either of us out of this right now, but I'm going to see and I'm going to cry and I'm going to scream and we're going to have our moments, and eventually there will come that moment where the alchemy happens and you're like, okay, we've leveled up, we broke the mirror, whatever it might be. True embodiment is allowing yourself to be 200% who you are, even if you're the only person in an entire room that believes in that truth or believes in that channel or believes in whatever that is. And it's this kind of code of courage, I think, that you really only get more of through the process. It doesn't make it any easier. It doesn't make it any softer necessarily, but you have to find the ways to release that energy through your body, to sit with whatever is coming up. And it's almost like you get another patch of like light body, when I think when you come into deep embodiment, you do, it illuminates more within you. And that's also what magnetizes more people to you. But, I think the funny thing that I'm even realizing, and I think Chrys, you can probably speak to this too, is that what it's feeling like right now in the embodiment journey on the planet is, it almost feels like we're getting into this like deeper layer of authenticity within the embodiment, that it's not as showy. Like we've been in this big like show of like, oh, look how authentic I am, look how embodied I am. And it's now, I think, more in this like, just watch me.
Well, some of us have to do that to embody it. Like for me, I have to put the costume on and pretend to be the Macbeth before I become Macbeth sometimes. And my ego doesn't always know that's happening, like we've all got blockages to ourselves. Like when I was working with you in business coaching containers and you were my business coach, when you would tell me things personal about yourself, or when I saw you being human, I started to judge. I would judge it a little bit because you were my coach. If we were just friends, I wouldn't have. I started to judge it a little bit because like, I'm paying this person money and she's human. Oh no, and don't think for a second I didn't also say, I think this is something for you to look at. I'm a healer. This is what I do. So it was easy for me to do that, but it still happened to me. I wasn't allowing you to be human because what I'm really noticing right now is the three of us have been involved in cultish, I'm just going to say ish, energies in our lives, okay? Because I was a part of a medicine group that is spread out all over the United States, which is a cult. And ayahuasca herself told me it was a cult when I was journeying with them. And I even went up to them and said, grandmother's telling me that this is a cult, and I need you all to tell me that it's not. That was how ridiculous I was back in the day. And so they told me that it wasn't. So, because I didn't want to accept that. And so I've now gotten out of that. It's infiltrated by reptilians. Let's just say the three of us have dealt with whatever level it is, whether it's reptilians, negative aliens, negative ego, whatever the case may be. There are forces, I believe, in the form of archons, mind parasites that are infiltrating the entire, or I think Don Juan would call them the predator. I could be wrong about that. But one of those books, I think it's Don Juan, refers to the archons as the predator, or the reptilians as the predator. And so whatever the force may be behind it, there is something that is wanting to come in and divide and conquer. And this cult energy that has shown up in the past couple hundred years, especially since the 1960s, is really interesting because I do believe that a lot of these cult leaders that we hear about, like that woman who mummified her own body, she was called the Mother or something. I don't know if you all know about that. Like they called her Mother something. And it just gets so weird because I believe that they really do believe in what they're talking about. Okay. But I think part of our embodiment, the three of us, and why we're gathering here today is to really talk about how we have to keep embodying, because even when we see that our teachers are human, we have to check in about that with ourselves. But we've also been around people who were specifically giving medicine to people that wasn't plant medicine on purpose. That's not uh, a negative ego thing they can't see. That is an agenda. Okay. There is something happening
Mm,
specifically. So I've actually witnessed and been a part of an organization that is specifically trying to possess bodies, create implants in people, um, cause mental health issues and addiction, to cause addiction, to keep coming back and doing these medicine retreats. So, on one hand, it's yes, you helped me embody some things, Brittany, around that and around being human, but also that embodiment really allowed me to come more into self trust and to more grounded view of what is happening. So, like when I returned to when I found Ascension Glossary again last year and started to read through it, I was like, wow, so much of this is stuff that I've received in my meditations and my medicine journeys. But I also felt some distortions in there, and that was true for me. So, Sean, can you start to go into the piece, like how you got into contact with Lisa Renee and energetic synthesis, who that's what Ascension Glossary, they're sort of two different entities, but they're from the same person, is how I take it. But tell us a little bit about how you got into that, because it sounds like your embodiment and all of the work that you had already done at that point laid the groundwork, like for Brittany and myself. We were able to see, like they exiled me out of that medicine group because I was saying that it was a cult and I was calling them out. You know how we do. We don't keep our mouth shut.
mm.
So, but why were we able to see it, but the other people around us were not? So let's go into that piece.
Yeah, I think it just depends on the trauma wounding or the susceptibility to these things, just the way that we would have a negative trauma bond to a father or a mother. And I don't know so in the CPTSD work that was founded by Pete Walker, so much of that is owning the no and being able to say what you did was wrong. Not this like spiritual bypass, like I gotta
Right.
forgive you, because it's the spiritual thing to do. Like, are they even asking you for forgiveness? Are they even engaging? Are they saying they're sorry? Is there even, I mean, it's a blessing if you can have that interaction. For the most part, I have that with my own mother. She'll, I can talk about pretty much anything, and she'll own, whatever it was. But that's a blessing. But if you aren't going to be able to have that in your life, there it's understandable to say, I forgive that person because, there's only so much that's going to happen, but you don't want to be attached to it. They don't want to engage. Okay, I forgive you. I let that go. So I think that that's one of the patterns that happens in these communities where, you don't want to say no. You don't want to say this feels off. It's just like, oh, mommy, like it feels so good. And then if I disagree with mommy, I'm not going to have mommy, but
Right.
then you're not connected to the mother. And in the CPTSD work, it's about accessing the true father, the true mother. And because I'm a parent, then that changed the way that we don't, hit our kid or anything, which is kind of a no brainer for our generation. But I realized just so many things that I thought like how, like this particular sternness that I would have with my daughter sometimes. And when I connected to the father, it's like, no, if I'm struggling, like the father is going to say, what's going on? No matter how I'm acting out or whatever, not provided it's not, violent. It's like, hey, what's going on with you? That's what the father would say. The false father would be, pick yourself up by your bootstraps. You're being too sensitive. Whatever. And so if you get locked into the false mothers and the false fathers, you're never going to connect to the real mother and the real father. And I'm really I'm in this process right now because it's so much a part of my experience, and I'm feeling that planetarily, but I don't want to be narcissistic about it because I'm just in that state right now. But it's the way that I'm experiencing the world now. You know, I'm experiencing how the mother is looking over the world. I'm experiencing how the father is looking over the world. So yeah, so I think that's one of the things that gets activated in those communities, and you know, the trauma bonding. You know, they just they don't face their own mother or face their own father. Then they find a spiritual community where maybe they have more embodied, you know, these pieces, or more integrated pieces. And then as soon as they find the piece that's not integrated, you know, oh man, you know, because it's just re-traumatizing. I'm going to lose it again. I'm going to lose mom again. I'm going to lose dad again. And that's really the core of it, as far as what I've experienced.
Yeah, so it sounds like you came into the energetic synthesis world already having a little bit of, doing your own healing work, but already having been awakened in many steps, which allowed you to see through some of the illusions. Because Brittany and I have talked about it. When I've gone to ascensionglossary.com, there's been quite a few times where I found myself being fully sucked into it. Like, it has its own energy. I mean, when Lisa says, if you found this information, it's because it was brought to you, and it is a data bank that has an energy that'll pull you in. That is true. I don't always,
Mm.
that can be inherently neutral. That doesn't have to be positive or negative, but that is definitely true there. So tell us about how you got involved with energetic synthesis and what you started to notice. Because what I want people to hear are some of the warning signs. This doesn't mean that Lisa Renee is a bad person, but we're all humans. So when people say I'm a guru, or I'm the one who's receiving from the guardian races, join my monthly membership and get this information from me. Yes, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but then it's going to breed that follower consciousness and that cult consciousness, which, because so many people in the world are not fully awakened to their power. See, I didn't book with Brittany as a coach because I felt like she was better than me or knew more than me, maybe in certain business uh, stuff, but like, I came as a colleague to her. You've got codes, and I know I've got codes for you, but this is an agreement. It wasn't giving my power over away to her. And so tell me about when you, how you came to energetic synthesis, and then where you started to notice the glitching or the cracks in the foundation, and how that led you to what you know now, and what has happened to some of the people that that were in that community.
Yeah, so in the beginning, it was a very authentic galactivation. Even though I was interested in extraterrestrials and ascension and these, you know, I had been on a path for a while, there was something very authentic and very powerful about that activation. And granted, I would say there wasn't really too much hanging out in the back. Oh, you know, I basically I befriended some older members in the community who had been around for a while. So they would just slowly reach out to me. And as I maybe started just moving out, and it was, and I won't say love bombing in the beginning. It was real and it was authentic. And then when I'd start asking questions, I would slowly have these older members reach out to me and just give me a little background and a little history. And one of those, you know, pieces was there was someone in Lisa's inner circle who was a psychologist, and had a conversation with this person at some point and just said there are just some things that Lisa doesn't want to see. So that was just helpful for me. I already had that background, that Toltec background, like I said, as far as meeting my teachers, and I don't get infatuated, you know, with teachers in that way. So it was just like a little kind of spidey sense, you know, something, you know, seems, you know, a little off here.
Right.
And I'd say when it really started to open up is that it was I joined ES, and then I got into a relationship with someone who had been in ES for a while, and started being recognized as a hierogamic, you know, couple in
There's
ES,
that
you know, which
word.
is really
There's that word. Brittany knows if I if I'm in a bad mood and I start, making fun of the spiritual community, I'll use that word, the Hyros Gamos 12D Ascension team. heart of crystalline Nibiru light. And I
Yep.
understand all these things. I know that all of this isn't just a bunch of made up hoopla, but like that's another one of those concepts you see on Ascension Glossary and in energetic synthesis, which is heavily focused upon. So I remember when I was watching your video, you were talking about your relationship and how they sort of idolized and chose you all as this like um, example of a perfect hierogamic union, which Lisa and her partner believe they are in as well. And they very well could be. I just want you to elaborate a little bit more on that when we start using these words, hyros, gamos, and all of this, because there are people, even on a project I just recently worked on, this couple. They live in Mount Shasta. They're covered in copper. I don't know if they bathe, and they love to go to Coachella, and they are the Hyros Gamos dragon ruby king and queen of the Magi Grail kings, okay? And they couldn't be less grounded if they tried. And there's a place for them, and it's on the top of Mount Shasta, okay? But and also, I do feel them being sweet people too, although there's a little bit of like just ridiculousness. I feel there's a lack of bridge building happening. That's what I really resonated with you, was that it felt like you didn't see Lisa Renee as just making it all up. It's all just a bunch of bullshit. But you have this grounded nature, and we need these bridges because there are going to be people who read this information or who find energetic synthesis or other communities like that, and they're going to resonate with it so much. Like I've had clients in the past 3 years idolize me, come to retreats, not to heal, to be with me because they looked at me as a Bashar or an Abraham Hicks or whatever they decided to put. And then when I didn't fulfill their fantasy of being the savior, I got turned into the villain. I was called a cult leader many times. And I get, when you talk about love bombing, we always say, I love you and you're incredible when you come into to these retreats, because we're trying to be opposite of what they've experienced in their life and trying to put these positive affirmations in there. But not everyone who isn't embodied is ready for that, because they'll take it like, oh, he wants to be my best friend. And I'm like, would you try to befriend your doctor this way? Like, what's happening in the spiritual community? It isn't just cult leaders, it's the cult followers that are allowing these cult leaders to do this. So, and then it's people like you who go into these spaces who start to, with your spidey senses, start to sense some of this happening. And then how did that go for you?
Yeah, so even though there are always pieces to heal and always things to learn in relationships, my history is I've had basically a series of long relationships, even going back to high school. I'd be with a girl for years, and never like really. Usually, like if I'm going to date someone, that's usually going to wind up being my partner. That's just the way that my life has flowed. So I got into this relationship, and then I'm very dedicated in these relationships and committed and love to have a partner who wants to do the work in a relationship and whatnot. And so the first thing that basically started happening is in that relationship, when the first like little barbs, started happening, the first little arguments, the first little, and this particular person, was also, had been on a path for a long time and whatnot. And, we had a lot of, wonderful experiences, deep experiences. But it got to this point where it was just feeling too incongruous, basically. And the way that I was, my experience, that I was just starting to feel kind of abused and, not seen and whatnot. And then interestingly enough, and this is what is so powerful about the whole thing, just like the grandmothers, it was like the grandmothers in that community reached out to me and they said, like, Sean, this is for you. Like we see you, like we see this dynamic like happening and whatever's being talked about or however your quote being recognized, this couple in the community and whatnot. And so then that was sort of the first step to start, transitioning out of this relationship, which that whole breakup happened in the process of going to a grid working event that Lisa was doing in Bali to launch the HGS manual, which I don't know if you guys know about that, because she kind of put it out and then she pulled it back.
Well, I know some of your works are
So,
in there, correct? Like some of your work.
well, so this is another thing that was always another incongruous piece, because while Lisa was, quote, bringing through HGS,
What is
so many people in the
HGS?
community.
Is this Hyros
So
Gamo something?
yeah, it's literally the Hyros Gamos system, I think.
Oh, gosh. Can you tell our listeners what in the hell Hyros Gamos is? I know what it is, but I just want you to explain it. What in the I say that to Brittany all the time. I'm like, what in the fucking Hyros Gamos is going on here? Okay.
So HGS is basically a healing tool. And so it's an intuitive healing tool, just like tarot or whatever. There's just a number of things in there and a number of different subjects. You're praying, aligning, and then you're just sort of using your hand, to feel through it, just like you would any kind of oracle. So when that was happening, so many people in the community were in these deep levels of mediumship. It felt like we were bringing it in, like this is a community, that's bringing in this. But just like you said, but there's no, oh, thanks community, for bringing it in. Is I'm Lisa Renee. I'm bringing it in. I'm bringing it in through the guardians. And again, not just like, I don't need any credit, but it's more just like, hey, we're doing this together. Some sort of awareness, that this is, being brought in, by all of us. So, I, there's a couple different flights that we had to take in order to get to Bali, and we were breaking up over that course. And I said, listen, this is already as hard as fuck already. Just like I'll just go back. I'll just take a plane, back home. You continue on. And she was like, no, this is a powerful relationship. Let's work through it, whatever. Yes, we're breaking up right now, but like let's accomplish this mission, like together.
And this is you and the
And
partner who you were dating or who you were in a hierogamic relationship at the time, which would basically mean
right.
that you were Yeshua and she was Mary Magdalene, right? That's basically what we're getting down to. You were the embodiment of the masculine and feminine union between two souls, almost kind of the way twin flame people talk about, that hierogamic union, which is supposed to happen within, but it's this idea that, it's between a male and a female, and you all are embodying the Lady and Lord Christ, sort of. Am I on the right page here?
For sure.
Okay.
For sure. And
Brittany and I
so,
talk about a lot because Brittany is, Brittany, being a lady Christ, she, she's definitely always looking for her Yeshua and her Hyros, and it's very powerful. People, even the idea of Hyros Gamos, there is something real there, but it can also prey on the love everlasting, extremely romantic idea of the one true love and your twin flame. And you have to be embodied to be able to handle that experience. And people are just like, it's Romeo and Juliet. And it's so much deeper than that. And you all very well could have been in a hierogamic union. And if so, that's going to bring up things on a soul level for you all, which is why it was so powerful, especially when you went to Bali, which is one of the most powerful locations on the planet. It's also heavily infiltrated by dark energies, but you all were there in Bali. So, you decided not to go on this flight back because she wanted you to stay. And what happened from there?
So the first thing that was just interesting is, because I didn't have that sort of sycophantic relationship with Lisa, and I talk about, this is basically the story that I tell in one of my videos. And so we were on our way to Bali, and Lisa and Tomas, and again, I'm just going to reiterate, I would talk to Lisa and Tomas any day of the week. The only reason that I'm saying their name and being public about this is because they won't talk to me. They won't talk to any of us. So the harm that I've seen, and just like you said, and I don't want this to happen to other people, that's why I use their names. So, so Lisa and Tomas were living in LA, and then LA was one of the stops. We were coming from Colorado. So I said, hey, we're going to be in LA. Let's hang out with Lisa and Tomas. And she just had this reaction like, oh no, just like this less than, kind of reaction. I'm just like, they're just fucking people. Like, why can't we just have dinner with these people? And so she had some resistance to it. I remember just like working through all that. I was like, all right, just but let's I'm down, I'm down if you are. So we get there, and like it was just like so much love, just like real in person. We've been having all these experiences over the years and all these powerful things, and we've been through a lot. So hey, and just like it was just like all hugs, just like it was great. And so then the first dynamic that I noticed in the relationship was there was even a moment in the conversation where Tomas basically like asked Lisa if he could speak. And it wasn't just like, I was just like, what's going on here? Like Harogamos, like it's just like what's this imbalance, like all about, like if you guys are so, in sync, with the universe and everything. And to Lisa's credit, she is very embodied. She was comfortable, there wasn't, but then it was just strange to see that I just realized then and there, oh, his awakening is all through Lisa. Everything that he's saying, and not that he doesn't have his own personal pieces of whatnot. There's this just mommy, can I speak now? And the same thing. My theory would be that he's probably pretty agreeable and probably afraid of not being agreeable because of mother wound.
Well, it also sounds kind of like a
So
dark feminine, or kind of a, this dark feminine, dark mother energy that's very prevalent right now, where, women are rising up into their divine feminine, but they're actually wanting to hold more of the power. It's not fully hierogamic or equal. And there's this, which is a program that's running. It's not something conscious that people are doing. So, which Brittany and I have talked a lot about that as well. So, when you say, like, when you are with them, you can, and I love that you're being as non-biased as possible, and you're actually talking about that there you can feel actual love there, and that's important for people to hear instead of just villainizing someone, because even though there was real love and there was real connection, there was real energy happening, there can still be doorways that dark energies can get into. And when I say dark, you can put whatever label you want on that, but or denser energies to get in through ego structures. So tell us about, like, when you when you started to wake up to this and when you started to notice these things, what was what was their reaction to you like?
So when that happened, and then let me add one other small piece. The other theme that I noticed in the community was that in general, there's this storyline that the women wake up first, and that there's always like the slow, like man who's like, you know, whatever, just like the woman's gonna lead the way, then you just gotta be patient for your, unenlightened man. That was like another theme in the community that was just, it was just
Which we do
wrong.
find, we actually do
Um,
find that that is happening, right, Brittany? Like, it is, that's a story we hear a lot in our own work. That's not the truth, but we are noticing that all of my retreats are full of women and their husbands are at home telling them that they're crazy. And then after a couple of retreats, their husbands catch up and start going, well, actually, I'm liking my partner now. Maybe I should go to this retreat. We are noticing that, yeah? I mean, I don't know about you,
It-
Brittany.
yeah, no, extremely. I've been noticing that for a while, but that was, going back on the mentors I worked with at first. They were very much in a twin flame space, and that was the first, entry into a lot of the spirituality that I leaned into. And that is even in the twin flame world. That's the whole thing is, the divine feminine wakes up and then the masculine, but they're going to run, and, you're supposed to just wait for them. And it's so toxic. And these, I was witnessing so many, including the mentors, in these super toxic, abusive relationships, all under the we're twin flame umbrella. So, yes,
hmm
We won't go
Yeah,
on
it feels
that
like the dark
tangent.
feminine because we've been in a patriarchy, but that's just now the false matrix operates in the duality. So we were a goddess culture for thousands and thousands of years. And then in the past 13,000 years, we really descended into this patriarchy. And so now there's this other pendulum swing that the archontic forces, I believe, are trying to implement with the moon and the divine feminine and all about the women and witches and all of that. And there's beauty in it. And then there's this program and this superiority in it. And that is also something that I think shows up when people have a lot of ego wounding. And, for a lot of women who come into the space and they're the ones who are the guru, because the gurus and the channels and the teachers were male for so long, there can be a little bit of an ego wound or a kind of overcompensating wound where, you know, you have to listen to me because I'm a woman. We were done so dirty, we were oppressed for so long that will still show up in the energetic synthesis but spiritual space. And that isn't true energy. Hyros Gamos is 100% 50-50. It's equal. So
Absolutely. And yeah, and I think that that is very, very common for sure. But the reason that it affected me the way that it did is that just and I think this is too, and I'm learning this more in the CPTSD work, and this is what I help men with as well. It's like we can be abused too. Like it's, like we can be abused too. And so you get in this situation to where, you just want to be that rock and, just hold, no matter what happens, but then you lose yourself in the process.
mhm.
So, um, so, and that's just basically, as far as my experience, what I was starting to experience in the relationship. And in all honesty, as far as my own experience, when I decided to break up with her, the guidance that came to me, because she was so hard on herself, she was so like my partner was so dedicated that when she made a mistake, it was almost suicidal.
Yeah.
And the sort of there was like this last experience that I had with her, and then I just had like this feeling. I said, dude, she's gonna lose it. Like if you like keep like this pressure in the relationship, she's gonna lose it. And that's why, and I, that's what I told her. I said, this just don't feel like it's gonna be, it's not good for me, but I'm saying, being honest about my experience, it feels like this is really gonna damage you. So why not just give it the space that it needs, and maybe you'll have a different partner who doesn't have the same sort of uh whatever I am, just whatever you need, whatever time you need, that's not maybe going to put that kind of pressure on things. So um we oh, and then again, I touched on this in my video, but it's another important piece as far as just the personal. The other thing that happened to me is that there was a good friend of ours in the community who definitely had her stuff, and she's kind of wild and says all kinds of wild stuff. She's a difficult personality, but Lisa made fun of her. And it just like happened for just a minute, and it was just like a little window into like, wait. You're like the Hyros Gamos like guardian like lady. Like that was just like some catty bullshit. Like what's that? So, and then I realized too that that's basically like what she's surrounded by. She's surrounded by a bunch of catty women that when they're, in their like little knitting circles, they're just making fun of all the other, people's, problems or, whatever. So we go to Bali, and again, see Lisa and Tomas again, and they know what's going on in our relationship, and I'm just being open about it. I don't need to be here, just like if I'm just disrupting things, just like my partner was paying for everything, and just like, hey, I've got, I'll let it go. And but the one thing that did happen to me before that, when we just had time in Bali, is what happens to me in grid working is I'm given songs. And so I'm given a song, and then I sing the song in the land. I touched base with the indigenous people there, and they taught me the how to sing it in the secular language, and then they taught me to sing it in the sacred language. Like that was my piece. So one night before the workshop was going to get started and everything, Lisa and Tomas, just called me over there. They're just like, this just seems like it's going to be too disruptive, for the rest of the group. Would you mind, going home? I was like, sure, absolutely. And then I just said, but what I'd like to do before I go, I'd like to sing you guys this song, that I was given. And it was just this really simple song, I just sang it there, in their hotel room, just like, a cappella, and went on my way. And then after basically just started getting more disrupted in the community, when everyone came back from Bali, and it was like the next phase of things, I started to speak up more. I wasn't with this partner and whatnot. Tomas wrote this post one time. We're just like, yeah, just trying to make me seem like all like crazy. It's just, yeah. And he sang this unintelligible song, and I didn't even know what it was even about. And like, but at the time, he just was like, he was feeling me because he's a musician. He was just there, and it was from my heart. And he was with me, like he was my brother, like in that moment. And then it just completely flipped. And just like, what's this crazy song? Crazy song that Sean is singing.
Yeah, is it possible that he
So
didn't
that was
write that
basically.
post? Is it possible that he didn't even write that post?
I don't
It's
think it.
written from
I
his
don't think it gets
perspective.
that crazy. Yeah, I don't think it gets that crazy because it's very apparent when he speaks, because I don't particularly feel like he's fully embodied in what Lisa is teaching.
Yeah,
So his language tends to be, I wouldn't say dry, but it's just not like the same juju
right,
isn't there
right,
because it's not flowing through him in the same way as
right.
that'd be my take.
Yeah. So, what were you saying to people? Like, because I went to Bali last May, and there were so many dark things happening. They took us, this high priest we were working with, took us to do this blood sacrifice ritual, which was so demonic. And I'm not Christian, but I got up out of there. I left the retreat early, and I let other people know how I was feeling. And so, I am exiled from that group as well. So, um, because it's easy for them to say, he's just a disruptor, he's not on board, he's not in alignment with us. I mean, just the whole group consciousness cultish program, because it was a cult energy that was happening. They were all just doing everything they were told. I mean, people in our group speaking in tongues during this ritual. Like, how did you all learn to do this? You didn't. You're being possessed right now. I was watching it firsthand. So,
mm,
and
mm,
that, of course, happened in Bali. And there was this, when I decided to speak up about it, there were many people who were open to it. Everyone, it was the teachers who had the issue with it, right? Even the one who pretended to be open to it was just having a conversation with me to make sure that I wasn't going to go public about it. So, yeah,
wow.
yeah. So, but no one has killed themselves, as far as I'm aware, around those teachings. Okay. See,
Mm,
I want you to speak a little bit about that because, as Brittany and I were talking about earlier, this is some of the real danger psychologically and spiritually that can happen not only with this type of group and this community, but within these types of teachings too that talk about negative aliens. It's just like a Christianity, you all. Like, um, they say that the church that I went to as a kid said that the dinosaur fossils were put there by Satan to test our faith. Well, can't
mm,
argue with that. So, even in the energetic synthesis or Ashayana Dean or the Ascension Glossary teachings, there are these little pockets that make you say, well, if I don't believe in this, then what if it's archons trying to keep me from believing in Lisa's teachings?
yep.
Okay, that's where I kind of want you
Yeah.
to touch on that and how that affected some of the people that you knew personally.
Yeah. So I wasn't as trauma informed as I am now. So but I had a certain psychological background where, and two, longer story for another time, but I also had a drug-induced psychotic break when I was younger as well, a number of years after my Kundalini awakening. And so I had seen those realms, I'd seen those hell realms, I'd
Hmm.
seen it, I'd experienced it. So when I got into the community, there was this one particular person, and I just started hearing these stories about this person. I'm just like, I know exactly what this guy is going through. Like, he's in hell. he's in hell. And not only in hell, but it's coming for him. And so my feeling even then at the time was, man, you got to slow the fuck down. Just like, you got to find out where this is coming from, and then because Lisa wasn't trauma informed, she was trying to help him. So then all she was doing was making it worse, because when you're in that state, it doesn't matter, like whatever vocabulary, ascension, whatever, fucking Thoth, like whatever, it's just giving that part of you more things to turn against you.
Yeah.
So, she had him believing basically like that Thoth was after him. And so he was just like in this, state. And when he killed himself finally,
Ugh.
he thought like and this is what people don't understand about psychosis. In psychosis, there's no right and wrong. Your little guardian angel like telling you what's what is gone. It's just, you're just in pure fear,
Yeah.
pure survival. So he thought that he needed to kill himself in order to save the universe. Like that's like how big, and I mean that there's nothing there that's telling you this is not reality. You really think that.
Right.
And not only that, but he was going to a practitioner in ES that Lisa was recommending, that was loading him up with demons so that when he killed himself, he could take as many demons with him as possible. How fucking insane.
I do
I don't
feel
even know.
intuitively that there were entities in him, but I don't believe that, like I can't believe that there was so much like as if it like, well, if you're going to do this, take all these demons with you. I mean, this feels very Christian, uh Abrahamic religion. It feels like that's why Brittany and I were talking earlier, like I've had these thoughts before. Back in the day, I would have really strange sexual fantasies and dreams, things from other lives, things that are happening on the planet right now. And that plagued me so much that I would hear voices in my head that was like, kill yourself and rid the world of the evil that you are. You're going to help by killing yourself. And I do
Sure.
know that it was archontic in nature, and I do believe that, because even if Lisa Renee had no cracks in the foundation, or none of these teachers had any cracks in their foundation, the minute you bring up the reptilians and the archons and the dark forces, well, that does open someone to interfacing with them. And if they have psychological, um, how do I put this, impairments or trauma that needs to be worked on, they're going to feed off of that. And so it feels like she's opening the door to all of this information, not giving you a bridge at all, telling you to jump across a ravine from working your 9 to 5 all the way to Hyros Gamos 12D reptilian ascension archon Ascene crystal ruby emerald sage. So there's this lack of bridge building, but also when you do get over there, there's this, you're not embodied in any of this. You didn't come to it all on your own. Here's this data bank of information. And then there's this fear that comes up. And I had it as well reading through her website many years ago, which I don't anymore because I understand it more. But my God, I had so much fear around, like, well, how do I know right now that my aversion to this isn't an archon telling me not to? I mean, it just got to the whole angels and demons thing, and
Hmm.
I would not be able to even have this conversation with you if I had not done so much healing work and really embodied into my own self trust. Because as I was going through the website just a few months ago, as I found you, because I found it again and was like, okay, here we are. There's so much information I'm resonating with, but also there's this tone of um, just 100% sureness around all of this. And a lot of the things on the website don't match up on Ascension Glossary. A lot of the pages will say one thing, and then another one it'll say another thing. It's like it has to be between a man and a woman here. And then this page says, oh, yeah, but there's non binary people, and that does happen. There's this not congruent information happening, which can also be very damaging to some people. And when people are killing themselves over information, that sounds like a religion to me. That sounds like another
Yeah.
new religion. It's like if there's reptilian, if the fact that there's reptilian and archontic control happening, they want the new age spiritual community to be the next religion that people kill themselves and go to war over. That's the whole divide and conquer agenda. So,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
what, where, when these people started to, and I don't want to say people because I know you just talked about one, but when this person took their own life, what happened after that? What was, I mean, did Lisa know about this? Um, was there talk about it? Was there open discussion?
And that was the hard part too, because obviously you can't, you're responsible for yourself. That was his choice. But if you're being honest about your influence, there was zero ownership on Lisa's part. Not nothing that she did personally, nothing she said to him, nothing about the practitioner that she was sending people to in the community. And even when he died, she sort of made this kind of like little kind of like wake like on the website for him, but it was just superfluous. There was no ownership. There was, just like, oh, you know, yeah, just whatever, same thing, just like nothing personal as far, or, I'm sure, she said nice things about him, but definitely nothing of, oh my God, this is partly my fault. Nothing, hey, this man came to me with wounds from his childhood that I couldn't see, that I just needed to get him to a good therapist, and then I was just loading him up with just more things that was just making him worse and worse. And and there's a bunch of stories, like all kinds of stuff happened, all kinds of violence with him, just like crazy shit. And there's also some people around him too that were just taking him around, like, quote, grid working, that were just feeding his fantasy, taking him all around the world. And then he would just, like, lose it in some other country and have to, get admitted, or, I can't remember if, police were involved, but same thing. But then there's no ownership with Lisa, where, oh, all of us are feeding him this story, like all of us are harming him, like all of us are basically, paving the road to hell with good intentions. And no one was trauma informed enough to just say, hey man, you need a good, and yeah, you just need a good therapist. You need to work on what happened to you when you were 7. That's what this is all about. Yes. And that's the thing. Yes, there's a galactic story going on, but to access all that soberly, if you don't have just, the embodiment, the healing, the trauma informed, even just being, nutritionally healthy, like, how are
Right.
you going to go up into all that stuff, if you don't have just the basics covered? And it was horrible.
Yeah. Um, Brittany, I'd like to hear from you on this because we've talked about this before.
Yeah, it's there's a couple things I think in this episode we've kind of touched on. One is that I think it's really important for leaders and practitioners to be honest about what they can handle, what they're able to do, what our strengths are, what we really feel embodied and confident in leading people in. And when it's not that arena or realm, being authentic enough to just say, hey, like, that's not for me. Um, I think on the other side of it, though, I have a client who was admitted, and
Oh,
it was
that's right. Oh my gosh.
exact,
Yeah.
and it was tough because the timing, and it's like, when these things happen, it's never a good time. The timing was on a holiday. It was, I was unable to get to her. By the time I was able to get to her, her partner pretty much was like, don't worry about coming. She's getting admitted. And then I was just sliced and cut out of the entire thing, which I
Hmm.
completely honored because, yes, I am pretty trauma informed, but on the flip side, I also, I'm going to let whoever she's seeing do their work. And if she wants to connect with me and come back around, then we'll have a conversation. And we did.
Hmm.
And it was, to me, and this has been recent. This is the closest that I've had this happen. And it's so hard for me being, you know, this huge heart person that I am to sit with someone who needs a better foundation. And, you know, that's what I told her. I said, you are awakening really quickly. Your gifts are activating extremely quickly. On top of all of that, though, she was going into places, you know, online that she would just get in rabbit holes and she would start going into all these things. And we'd be on one thing in a session, and then 48 hours later, she's like 18 light years past that. And I was like, okay, like, you know, and I try to be like, well, what are you feeling? What's coming up? You know, any of that. But it gets to a point where this is what I told her. I said, you know, if we continue to do any work together, number one, you have to build a super solid rooted foundation in your trust of self. Otherwise, you're going on a rodeo ride with zero experience, and it's dangerous. It's dangerous for multitudes of reasons. You put the energetic, you put, you know, trauma, anything. It's like there's so many things that could go awry. And so I just told her, I said, you know, there is a deep, deep necessity in this realm for you to feel solid in your discernment and who you are in your trust of self. And you can't keep going at this point without that, you know. And, you know, even to that, I told her, I said, I may not be able to be that person for you. And so I told her, you know, there's a lot you're trying to digest. Let's just take a beat. Let's you get your body and yourself. You just got out of this space. Just be in your own bubble for a minute and let's kind of reconvene. But, you know, it's so sad. I'm like sitting here listening to this story and I'm like, I could not even imagine if that was on my hands for any sort of a reason that someone did that. And I also can't even put myself in shoes of not speaking about it. You know, it's like I won't even speak too much on that, but I can't personally imagine being in that space. Yeah, there's so much I feel like I continue to talk on and about and through, but Sean, I really appreciate you again just bringing all of this to light because you know there are cautionary measures I think that really need to be talked about more in diving into expanding your consciousness in any way, right? It's like it doesn't matter if you're just online scrolling, if you're on TikTok, if you have a mentor, if you're in a community, you know, discernment, sovereignty, checking in with yourself, taking breaks from this. I think we get in these like portals of just like Chrys was saying, you know, we get sucked in and then 5 hours later we're like, oh my God, my brain's exploding because I just went down this rabbit hole, then I got to this rabbit hole. And it's like there's just basics and foundational things that I think need to be shared more. So I really appreciate you bringing a lot of this forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate you guys too.
Yeah, and thank you for being brave, for saying names, and for also being so in your center about it. And because, like, I do not, I would hate to hear a podcast about me one day and they have no idea what they're talking about and and I feel totally misunderstood. So, you know, this is not to bash Lisa Renee because there's a lot of great information out there. And I do believe what my personal belief is that as Lisa Renee brings through this information or anyone, it's there. Is Lisa Renee immune to being archontically influenced? No, she's not. All of us have to be mindful of that constantly. If we get into our guru, I'm a god, I'm the leader of this information, I'm the messiah, they're going to feed off of that. They love that ego consciousness. And I also believe that archons want you to be obsessed and go down rabbit holes about archons. Okay, that's how insidious those mind parasites are. So, and it's possible that Lisa Renee believes deep down that when that guy killed himself, he took a bunch of demons with him. So we're sad, but also thank goodness because the ascension is happening faster because of it. Who knows what she actually believes deep down and how that may sound insidious to some. If it really did help the ascension and she knows it and the guardian races told her that it helped that he killed himself, I guess we honor that. I don't feel like honoring that in this moment, but there's so much distortion in the spiritual community and so many, it's like a fun house. Every time you think you're on your way out, you hit a mirror, you hit another mirror. And that's what we're here to really, when we're ascending the matrix, I just have to say, not everyone is ready for this information. Not everyone is ready to understand what archons are and the reptilian influence on this planet. Not everyone is ready to know what's happening underground and about the Illuminati and the satanic ritual abuse. We are so mind controlled on this planet and kept in such a like little boxes on the hillside sort of consciousness that anything that's about to disrupt that can send people straight into psychosis, and they want that. I believe the archons are like, yes, tell everyone about the archons. So it's like we have to be really discerning and walk a fine line here. And the three of us have really lived it in real time, which was a part of our embodiment. That's why I felt so called to have you on here, Sean, because I didn't just want you to get on here so we could talk about Lisa Renee and all of this Hyros Gamos stuff, okay, and how ridiculous it can sound to some people who have no idea, even if it was such incredible, beautiful information and there was no um, distortions in it. People can't understand half of the shit on that Ascension Glossary website. Okay, so and it makes a lot of the clients I've worked with, it made them feel like, oh, I'm not where I'm supposed to be. I'm not ascended enough. I can't possibly understand that information. And I'm like, there's a little bit of intentionality behind that. You know, look at all the words I'm using. You need me. You need people like us to give you this information. And I want everyone to know you're the healer, you're the medicine, you are you're safe to learn some of this information if it's right for you. Not every, even if archons are all up in all of us right now, all you have to do is become aware of them and question and discern and not act on every single thought and emotion that you have. And that's, again, a part of our embodiment. So thank you so much, Sean, for being here with us. I may have you back because there's even more I want to talk to you about. But tell us where we can find you, what your website is, how we can work with you, all the things.
Yeah, so the one thing I do want to say too is that I really want people to know that as far as my experience with Lisa and Tomas, anything that's negative that's happening, I don't think it's conscious. I know I said that at the beginning of the video, but it's important for me because of all the, Lisa's attacking me in my dreams and, all this kind of stuff. So I just really want to say for the record, because in all honesty, there's actually nothing but love. Like I said, I'd talk about any of that. I'd go over to their house, have dinner, and talk about this stuff with them. So yeah, so I just want to say that my website is tigerseyeportal.com. I as in eyeball. And if you do want to do session work, like it's not really out in front, it's just kind of like in the consulting, mentoring, tab on there, because my landscaping and everything is really out front right now. And yeah, I appreciate you guys looking me up, and I really enjoy hanging out with you guys, and how funny Chrys is, and the work that you guys are doing. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So everyone head over to tigerseyeportal.com. I'll put that in the description box below. And if you want to work with me, you can go to chrisking.com, medicinealchemist.com, or ascendedastrology.com, and find me on Chrys at Chrys King on social media, ChrysKyng. Brittany, what about you?
You can go to BrittanyRenee.com, the Brittany Renee on Instagram, and that babe B on TikTok.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. In the name of Hyros Gamos 12D Ascension Ruby Violet Ray of Blue Ray Starseed Matrix Crystal Heart, I'm going to bid you all a good day and happy ascension. Love you all.